Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UEV horizon and looked at the stars ahead. The ship had been traveling for 3 months now, moving deeper into space than any human had ever gone. Before, Jake was 35 years old with brown hair and calm blue eyes that missed nothing. He had been chosen to lead this mission because he could think fast and stay cool. When things went wrong, the Horizon was not a big ship, but it was built well. It carried a crew of 12 humans who were the best at what they did. Lisa Carter sat at the navigation station, her red hair tied back as she watched the star charts on her screen. She was 28 and could find a path through space that others would miss. Nick Bradley worked in the engine room below, keeping their faster-than-light drive running smooth. He was older than the others at 42, with gray hair and hands that could fix anything. Drive Amy Walsh studied strange new things they found in space. She was 30 and very smart, with black hair and green eyes that got excited when she saw something new. Jake walked over to Lisa and asked how long until they reached the next system. She looked at her numbers and said they would be there in 2 hours. The system was called Kepler 442 and had several planets that might have life on them. This was why they had come so far from Earth, to see what was out there and maybe find other beings like themselves. But when they came out of faster-than-light travel near the 4th planet, they found something they did not expect. The space around them was full of ships. These ships were not like anything humans had ever built. They were long and thin with a crystal-like surface that caught the light from the local star. The ships moved in perfect patterns, like they were dancing in space. Jake told his crew to be ready for anything. Lisa counted more than 50 alien ships around them. Nick made sure their engines could get them out of their fast if needed. Drive Amy Walsh stared at the alien ships with wonder and a little fear. One of the alien ships moved toward them. It was much bigger than the Horizon and seemed to be made of the same crystal material as the others. As it got closer, Jake could see that it was beautiful in a cold way, like looking at ice sculptures in winter. A voice came through their radio system. It spoke in perfect English, which surprised everyone on the bridge. The voice was smooth, but had no feeling in it at all. "Unknown vessel, you have entered space controlled by the Zephyrian Empire. You will stop your ship and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Jake looked at his crew. They all looked back at him, waiting to see what he would do. He had trained for first contact with alien life, but not like this. He pressed the button to reply. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earth Vessel Horizon. We are explorers from Earth, seeking peaceful contact with other intelligent species. We mean no harm." There was silence for a long moment. Then the alien voice spoke again. "Earth species are unknown to us. You will comply with boarding procedures or face consequences." This is not a request. Jake felt his anger rise. He had not come all this way to be pushed around by beings who thought they could order humans around like pets. He looked at Lisa, who shook her head, knowing what he was thinking. Nick appeared on the bridge, ready for whatever came next. Dr. Amy Walsh moved closer to hear everything. "We will not submit to boarding without knowing your intentions," Jake said into the radio. "We are here in peace, but we are not here to surrender." The alien ships around them began to move into attack positions. Their weapons started to glow with a blue light that made Jake think of lightning. But he did not back down. Something inside him would not let these aliens think humans were weak or afraid. The big alien ship stopped moving toward them. After another minute, the voice came back, and this time it sounded almost curious. "Your species shows unexpected behavior. Most new species comply immediately when faced with Zephyrian military power. You interest us, Earth beings. Fleet Commander Vexthal wishes to speak with your leader." Jake straightened his uniform and told Lisa to open a video channel. The main screen flickered and then showed the inside of the alien ship. The being looking back at them was tall and thin, made of what looked like living crystal. Its body caught the light and threw it back in strange patterns. It had no face as humans would know it, but Jake could tell it was looking at him with something like interest. "I am Fleet Commander Vexthal of the Zephyrian Empire," the being said. "Your species is new to us. You do not behave as others do when they meet our fleet. This makes you either very brave or very foolish. We shall discover which." Fleet Commander Vexthal studied the human leader on the screen with growing curiosity. In 3,000 years of Zephyrian expansion across the galaxy, no species had ever refused their initial compliance demands. Most surrendered immediately. When they saw the size of the Zephyrian fleet, a few tried to fight and were quickly destroyed. But these humans did something different. They talked back. "Your species will prove its worth through trials," Vexthal announced. "If you succeed, you may continue to exist. If you fail, your species will be marked for elimination. Do you accept these terms?" Jake looked at his crew. Lisa Carter shook her head slightly, worried about what they were getting into. Nick Bradley crossed his arms, ready to fight if needed. Dr. Amy Walsh leaned forward, fascinated by their first contact with alien intelligence despite the danger. "What kind of trials?" Jake asked. "3 tests that show the qualities we value in useful species: combat prowess, intellectual capacity, and leadership under pressure. Your species will provide champions for each trial. We will provide the challenges." Jake knew he had no real choice. If he refused, the Zephyrians would destroy them and probably send a fleet to Earth. If he accepted, at least humanity would have a chance to prove itself. "We accept," Jake said. Vexthal nodded with what might have been approval. "The first trial will test combat ability. Your champion will face War Prime Kethfer on the neutral moon below. Prepare yourself, human." The connection ended, leaving Jake's crew staring at a blank screen. Lisa immediately started checking their sensors for information about the moon. Nick began making sure their shuttle was ready for the trip down. Drive Amy Walsh pulled up everything their computers had recorded about the Zephyrians. "Jake, you can't do this," Lisa said. "We don't know anything about their combat abilities or weapons. This could be suicide. If I don't do it, they'll destroy us anyway," Jake replied. "At least this way we have a fighting chance." 2 hours later, Jake stood on the surface of a small rocky moon. The air was thin but breathable, and the gravity was lighter than Earth normal. The Zephyrians had transported him here in one of their ships, a strange experience that felt like being dissolved and put back together. The fighting area was a circle of flat ground surrounded by rocky hills and strange crystal formations. Jake wore his standard military gear and carried the weapons he was most comfortable with: a plasma rifle, a sidearm, and a combat knife. The Zephyrians had allowed him these after scanning them and deciding they were primitive enough to be fair. War Prime Kethfer appeared across the circle from Jake, and the human immediately understood why the Zephyrians were so confident. The alien warrior was 7 feet tall and covered in crystal armor that seemed to be part of its body. It carried weapons that glowed with energy Jake could not identify. Its movements were perfect and controlled, like a machine built for fighting. "You are small and soft," Kethfer said, its voice carrying easily across the space between them. "I have defeated champions from 200 species. Your death will be quick." Jake said nothing. He had learned long ago that talking during a fight was usually a waste of energy. Instead, he studied his opponent and the ground around them, looking for any advantage he could find. A Zephyrian voice announced the start of combat, and Kethfer immediately fired a beam of blue energy at Jake. The human dove behind a rock formation. As the beam melted the ground where he had been standing, the smell of burning stone filled the air. Jake rolled to his left and fired his plasma rifle at the alien warrior. The shot struck Kethfer's crystal armor and bounced off harmlessly. The War Prime laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and advanced toward Jake's position. For the next 10 minutes, Jake ran and hid while Kethfer hunted him across the rocky drain. The alien's weapons were more powerful than anything Jake had ever faced, turning rocks into melted slag and leaving burning craters in the ground. But Jake noticed something important. Kethfer fought like a machine, using the same patterns over and over. The Zephyrian would fire, advance in a straight line, fire again, then pause to scan for targets. It was efficient, but predictable. Jake began to use this against his opponent, leading Kethfer into areas where the rocky ground would slow its advance, or where crystal formations would interfere with its scanning. Jake's plasma rifle was useless against the alien's armor, but he had other ideas. He led Kethfer up a steep hill toward one of the larger crystal formations. The alien followed, confident in its superior firepower and protection. At the top of the hill, Jake suddenly turned and charged directly at the surprised Zephyrian. Keffer fired, but Jake had anticipated this and threw himself to the side at the last second. The energy beam struck the large crystal formation behind Jake, and the crystal exploded like a bomb. Sharp pieces of crystal flew everywhere. Most bounced off Keffer's armor, but some found gaps in the protection. The alien warrior staggered, bright blue liquid leaking from several wounds. For the first time, it looked uncertain. Jake pressed his attack, using his combat knife to strike at the damaged areas in Keffer's armor. The alien was stronger and had better weapons, but Jake was faster and more unpredictable. He fought like humans had always fought, dirty, desperate, and with absolute refusal to give up. When Keffer finally fell, both warriors were bleeding and exhausted. Jake stood over the defeated alien, breathing hard but still alive. Above them, Zephyrian ships hovered in silence. Impossible. Vexthal's voice came from speakers hidden in the rocks. Keffer has never been defeated. Jake looked up at the alien fleet and spoke loudly enough for their sensors to pick up his words. Then maybe it's time you learn something new. Back aboard the Horizon, Drive Amy Walsh tended to Jake's wounds while he told them about the fight with Keffer. Lisa Carter had monitored everything from orbit, and her hands still shook from watching their commander nearly die on the alien moon. The second trial will test intellectual capacity, Vexthal announced through their communication system. Your species will attempt to solve a problem that has challenged our greatest minds for generations. Amy looked up from bandaging Jake's arm. She knew without being told that this would be her trial, as the ship's xenobiologist and the only one with advanced degrees in multiple sciences. She was their best hope for any intellectual challenge. What is the nature of this problem? Amy asked. You will be given access to our research data regarding quantum storm interference in hyperspace travel. For 800 years, these storms have made faster-than-light travel dangerous and inefficient in our sector. Solve this problem, and your species will have passed the second trial. Amy felt her stomach tighten. 800 years of research by an advanced alien civilization, and they expected her to solve it. But she also felt excitement building inside her. This was the kind of challenge she had dreamed about since becoming a scientist. The Zephyrians transported Amy to their main research vessel, a massive ship that looked more like a floating city than a starship. Inside, everything was made of the same crystal material as their bodies, creating hallways and rooms that sparkled with inner light. Science Prime Nextel met Amy in the research center. Like all Zephyrians, Nextel was tall and crystalline, but its body had more complex patterns than the warriors Amy had seen. Its crystal structure seemed to shift and change as it thought, creating beautiful but alien displays of light. You are even smaller than your combat champion, Nextel observed. Your brain case appears insufficient for complex calculation. This trial will demonstrate the limits of primitive organic intelligence. Amy said nothing. She had dealt with arrogant colleagues before, though none had been 7-foot-tall crystal beings from another star system. She followed Nextel to a workstation that had been modified for human use. The research data was enormous. Hundreds of years of observations, experiments, and failed theories filled holographic displays around Amy's workstation. The quantum storms were areas of space where the normal rules of physics became unstable, making faster-than-light travel unpredictable and often fatal. The Zephyrian approach to the problem was methodical and mathematical. They had tried to map every variable, measure every energy fluctuation, and create equations that could predict when and where the storms would occur. Their work was impressive in its scope and precision, but Amy quickly saw the flaw in their thinking. You're trying to predict chaos, Amy said after several hours of study. Chaos can be calculated with sufficient data, Nextel replied. We simply need more precise measurements and more complex equations. No, Amy said, leaning back in her chair. Chaos can't be predicted because it's not supposed to be predicted. You're fighting against the nature of the quantum storms instead of working with them. She began to pull up data on her screen, showing Nextel patterns that the Zephyrians had dismissed as random noise. But Amy saw something else in those patterns, the same kind of rhythms she had studied in living systems. Back on Earth, look at this data from your sensors, Amy said, highlighting sections of the quantum storm readings. These aren't random energy bursts. They're more like breathing patterns or heartbeats. The storms are behaving like living things. Next's crystal body flickered with what might have been confusion or irritation. Quantum storms are not alive. They are purely physical phenomena governed by mathematical laws. But what if we treat them as if they were alive? Amy asked, her excitement growing as the idea formed. What if instead of trying to predict where the storms will be, we learn to communicate with them? She began working feverishly, pulling together data on quantum field fluctuations and comparing them to biological patterns. She knew from Earth, the Zephyrians had been trying to force their way through the storms with bigger engines and stronger shields. Amy proposed something completely different. We don't fight the storms, she explained to the growing crowd of Zephyrian scientists who had gathered to watch. We ask them to let us pass. We send signals that match their natural rhythms, like singing a song they recognize. The alien scientists exchanged glances that Amy couldn't interpret, but she could sense their skepticism. Science Prime Next's crystal patterns shifted to what Amy was learning meant displeasure. You propose to communicate with mindless energy patterns, Nextel said. This is not science. This is primitive superstition. Then let me test it, Amy challenged. Give me a small ship and let me try. What happened next surprised even Amy. Her theory worked better than she had hoped. By modulating their ship's energy output to match the quantum field patterns she had identified, she was able to guide a test vessel through a storm that had been impossible to navigate for decades. The Zephyrian scientists watched in stun silence as Amy's approach opened up hyperspace routes that had been closed since before their empire began. Not only had she solved their 800-year-old problem, she had revealed entirely new possibilities for faster-than-light travel. Impossible, Nextel whispered, its crystal body flickering rapidly with what Amy now recognized as deep agitation. Our calculations showed this approach had zero probability of success. Amy smiled and looked at the alien scientist with something approaching pity. That's because your calculations assumed the universe works like a machine. But the universe is more like a garden. You can't force it to do what you want, but if you understand how it grows, you can work with it instead of against it. The implications of Amy's breakthrough rippled through the Zephyrian research community like a shockwave. In a single day, a primitive human had accomplished what their greatest minds had failed to achieve in 8 centuries. But more than that, Amy had revealed something disturbing about Zephyrian thinking. Their perfect logic and mathematical precision had blinded them to solutions that required intuition and creativity. They had become so focused on controlling the universe that they had forgotten how to listen to it. When Amy returned to the horizon, she found Jake and the others waiting anxiously for news. Her smile told them everything they needed to know before she spoke. Trial number 2 is complete, she announced, and I think we just taught the Zephyrians something they never expected: to learn from humans. The 3rd trial began 2 days after Amy's success with the quantum storm problem. Fleet Commander Vextel seemed different now when he appeared on their communication screen. His crystal body pulsed with patterns that Amy had learned meant deep thought or uncertainty. The final trial will test leadership under pressure, Vextel announced. Your champion will command a mixed crew of humans and Zephyrians in a crisis simulation. Success requires maintaining unit cohesion while achieving the mission objective. Under extreme stress, Jake knew this trial was meant for him. Leading people was what he did best. Though he had never tried to lead aliens before, the challenge would be getting Zephyrians to follow a human commander when their entire culture was built on rigid hierarchy and species superiority. What is the nature of the simulation? Jake asked. A space station is failing due to critical system damage. The crew must be evacuated and essential research data preserved before total system collapse. You will have access to both human and Zephyrian personnel, but command authority rests with you alone. Jake nodded. It sounded straightforward enough, but he suspected there would be complications the Zephyrians weren't mentioning. There always were. The simulation took place aboard a Zephyrian training facility that could create realistic emergency scenarios. Jake found himself standing in a recreation of a damaged space station, with sparks flying from broken panels and warning alarms echoing through the corridors. His team consisted of Lisa Carter and Nick Bradley from his own crew, plus 6 Zephyrian specialists led by Sub-Commander Texmer. The Zephyrians had agreed to follow his orders for the duration of the trial, but Jake could sense their reluctance. They moved with precise military efficiency, but showed no enthusiasm for serving under a human. The simulation began with multiple system failures cascading through the station. Jake quickly assessed the situation and began giving orders. Lisa would coordinate the evacuation of civilian personnel, while Nick worked with the Zephyrian engineers to stabilize the power systems. Jake would lead a team to retrieve critical research data from the central computer core. But the Zephyrians had different ideas about how things should be done. Sub-Commander Texmer immediately began countermanding Jake's orders, insisting that Zephyrian protocols required a different approach to the crisis. Human methods are inefficient, Texmer declared. Zephyrian emergency procedures have been perfected over millennia. We should follow established protocols. Jake felt his temper rising, but kept his voice calm. Your protocols might work fine for Zephyrian crews, but we have humans here too. We need to adapt our approach to use everyone's strengths. The argument continued while precious time ticked away, and the simulated station continued to deteriorate. Jake realized that the real test wasn't about managing a crisis, it was about managing people from 2 completely different cultures who didn't trust each other. Then the simulation became real. Alarms started blaring on the Zephyrian training facility itself, not just in the simulated environment. Vexthal's voice came over the intercom with urgent news that made Jake's blood run cold. All personnel to emergency stations. We have received a distress signal from Research Station Vexandra. Critical systems failure with 3,000 civilian researchers and support staff trapped aboard. This is not a simulation. Jake looked at his mixed team of humans and Zephyrians. The artificial crisis had become a real one, and now lives actually depended on how well they could work together. Sub-Commander Texmer stared at Jake with what might have been respect or challenge. It was hard to tell with Zephyrian expressions. Your orders, Commander, Texmer asked. The next 8 hours tested Jake's leadership abilities beyond anything he had experienced before. The rescue operation required perfect coordination between human intuition and Zephyrian precision. Jake found ways to use both approaches, letting the Zephyrians handle technical procedures where their methodical nature was an advantage, while relying on human creativity for the unexpected problems. Lisa Carter proved invaluable in coordinating with the trapped civilians, using her natural empathy to keep panic from spreading while managing the complex evacuation procedures. The Zephyrian researchers trusted her in ways they never would have trusted their own commanders, who followed protocols instead of caring about individual needs. Nick Bradley worked seamlessly with the Zephyrian engineers, his practical experience complementing their theoretical knowledge. When the station's power systems began failing in ways their textbooks had never covered, Nick's ability to improvise solutions saved critical life support systems. But the real breakthrough came when Jake realized that effective leadership meant knowing when not to lead during the most dangerous part of the rescue, when they needed to stabilize the station's reactor core. He stepped back and let the Zephyrian specialists take charge of their areas of expertise while he focused on the bigger picture. Sub-Commander Texmer, you have the reactor team, Jake announced. Lisa, coordinate medical evacuation of the injured. Nick, get me a damage assessment on the structural integrity. I'll handle resource allocation and communication with the evacuation ships. For the first time since the crisis began, the Zephyrians moved with real purpose instead of reluctant obedience. Jake had given them responsibility instead of just orders, and they responded by performing beyond even their own high standards. The rescue succeeded with all 3,000 researchers safely evacuated and critical data preserved. As the last evacuation shuttle pulled away from the dying station, Jake stood on the bridge of the Zephyrian command ship and felt the exhaustion of the past 8 hours finally catching up with him. Sub-Commander Texmer approached him, moving with the formal precision that Zephyrians used for important moments. Commander Morrison, Texmer said, I have served under Zephyrian commanders for over 2 centuries. They give orders and expect obedience. You gave us trust and earned respect. This is a form of leadership we had not encountered before. Jake looked at the alien officer and saw something he hadn't expected. Genuine admiration. Not for human superiority, but for a different way of thinking about what leadership meant. Leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. Jake replied, it's about helping everyone else be as smart as they can be. Fleet Commander Vexthal appeared on the main screen, his crystal patterns shifting in ways that Amy had told Jake meant deep contemplation. The 3rd trial is complete, Vexthal announced, but the results raise questions we did not expect to face. Your species has succeeded in all 3 trials, but more than that, you have demonstrated capabilities that challenge our understanding of what makes a species valuable. Jake waited for the other shoe to drop. Something in Vexthal's tone suggested that passing the trials might not be the end of their problems. Tomorrow, we will discuss what these results mean for the future relationship between your species and the Zephyrian Empire. Vexthal continued, prepare yourselves, humans. The real test may just be beginning. Fleet Commander Vexthal stood in his private chambers aboard the command ship, staring out at the stars and struggling with thoughts that had never troubled him before. In 3,000 years of Zephyrian expansion across the galaxy, they had encountered over 400 different species. All had followed predictable patterns. They either submitted immediately to Zephyrian superiority, or they fought and were destroyed. The humans had done neither. They had proven themselves worthy through the trials, but more disturbing than that, they had revealed flaws in Zephyrian thinking that Vexthal was not sure his people could face. When Jake Morrison arrived at the meeting chamber the next day, he found not just Vexthal waiting for him, but also War Prime Kethfer and Science Prime Nextel. The War Prime's crystal armor still showed cracks from their battle, while the Science Prime's body patterns flickered with what Jake now recognized as agitation. Sit, Commander Morrison, Vexthal said, gesturing to a chair that had been constructed to accommodate human proportions. We must discuss what your species has accomplished and what it means. Jake sat down carefully, aware that this conversation would determine humanity's future relationship with the Galactic Empire. Lisa Carter, Nick Bradley, and Amy Walsh stood behind him, ready to support their commander however he needed. Your species passed all 3 trials, Vexthal began, but the manner of your success troubles us deeply. War Prime Kethfer, explain what you learned from your defeat. The Crystal Warrior's patterns shifted to what Amy had identified. As embarrassment mixed with reluctant respect, the human fought without honor or proper form. He used the environment as a weapon and refused to engage in direct combat until the final moments. His victory was achieved through chaos rather than skill. But he won, Vexthal pointed out, despite being smaller, weaker, and armed with inferior weapons. Yes, Kethfer admitted. And in doing so, he revealed that our combat doctrines may be flawed. We fight with precision and follow established patterns. The human adapted constantly, using strategies that our training never prepared us for. Science Prime Nextel's crystal body pulsed with rapid light patterns. That Jake had learned meant extreme distress. The female human's approach to the quantum storm problem was even more disturbing. She abandoned mathematical rigor entirely, choosing instead to anthropomorphize natural phenomena. By all logical analysis, her method should have failed completely. But it worked, Amy said quietly from behind Jake. Sometimes the universe doesn't follow the rules we think it should follow. Exactly, Vexthal said, his attention shifting to Amy. Your success revealed that our greatest minds have been trapped by their own perfection. We became so focused on precise calculation that we lost the ability to see beyond our equations. Jake sensed that they were approaching the real heart of the matter. The Zephyrians weren't just troubled by humanity's success in the trials. They were facing a crisis of identity that went to the core of their civilization. What is it you really want to know? Jake asked. Vexthal was quiet for a long moment. Before answering, we want to understand what your species possesses that we have lost. 3,000 years ago, when we first achieved interstellar travel, we were explorers like you. We sought knowledge and growth, but somewhere in our expansion across the galaxy, We became something different. You became perfect, Jake said. Yes. We eliminated chaos from our society. We established rigid hierarchies based on function and capability. We created a system where every Zephyrian knew their place and performed their role with maximum efficiency. We thought this was advancement. Jake looked at the three aliens and saw something he hadn't expected: uncertainty. These beings who commanded fleets and ruled star systems were struggling with doubts about the very foundations of their society. But perfection is a trap, Jake said. When everything is perfectly ordered, there's no room for growth or change. You become so afraid of making mistakes that you stop trying new things. War Prime Kethfer stepped forward. This human speaks truth that we have been avoiding. Our combat methods have not changed in centuries because they were deemed perfect. But perfect methods cannot adapt to imperfect opponents. Science Prime Nextal S patterns flickered rapidly. Our research has stagnated for the same reason. We pursue only investigations that our models predict will succeed. We have eliminated the possibility of unexpected discoveries. The trials were meant to evaluate your species, Vexthal continued, but they have instead forced us to evaluate ourselves. You possess qualities that our society has bred out of our people: creativity, adaptability, the willingness to take risks and learn from failure. Amy stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic caution. What happened to those qualities in your people? Did you simply decide they were inefficient? Worse, Vexthal replied. We decided they were dangerous. Chaos leads to conflict. Individual expression creates inequality. Risk-taking results in failure and waste. So we eliminated these things from our society and called it progress. But those things aren't bugs, Jake said. They're features. Chaos drives innovation. Individual expression creates diversity of thought. Risk-taking leads to breakthrough discoveries. You didn't eliminate problems. You eliminated the things that make life worth living. The silence that followed Jake's words was profound. The three Zephyrians stood motionless, their crystal bodies dim as they processed concepts that their society had spent millennia trying to forget. Finally, Vexthal spoke again. There are factions within our empire who see your species as a threat to our way of life. They believe that human influence could destabilize our perfect society. Science Prime Nextal leads those who think your chaotic methods should be contained before they spread. Nextal S patterns flashed with what Jake now recognized as anger. The human approach to problem solving is seductive but dangerous. If our people begin to question established methods, our entire civilization could collapse into disorder. And War Prime Kethfer represents those who see value in learning from human methods. Vexthal continued. They believe our military has become too rigid and predictable. Kethfer nodded. This human defeated me by doing things I could not predict, because my training taught me such tactics were impossible. We need to learn from this. Jake realized that humanity had stumbled into the middle of a brewing civil war within the Zephyrian Empire. Their success in the trials had not just proven human worth, it had forced the aliens to confront fundamental questions about their own society that they had been avoiding for centuries. What happens now? Jake asked. Vexthal's crystal patterns shifted to something that might have been sadness. Now we must decide whether the Zephyrian Empire will embrace change or destroy the force that threatens to bring it. Your species has given us a choice we never wanted to face. The attack came without warning in the middle of the ship's night cycle. Jake woke to the sound of alarms and the feeling of the horizon shaking under weapons fire. He rolled out of his bunk and grabbed his uniform, knowing that the moment he had been dreading had finally arrived. Emergency lighting cast red shadows through the corridors as Jake made his way to the bridge. Lisa Carter was already at her station, her face pale in the crimson glow. Nick Bradley's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering. REPORTING massive damage to their defensive systems. Report, Jake ordered as he took his command chair. Zephyrian Battle Fleet, Lisa said, her voice tight with controlled fear. 30 ships in attack formation. They're not responding to our communications. On the main screen, Jake could see the alien vessels arranged in a perfect crystalline pattern that was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. These were not the same ships that had challenged them to trials. These were warships, built for destruction rather than exploration. Amy Walsh appeared on the bridge, having run from her quarters when the attack began. "Jake, I'm picking up transmissions between the alien ships. The leader is someone called High Caste Zerthex. He's ordering the complete destruction of the Horizon and all human crew." Jake felt ice forming in his stomach. This was the conservative faction that Vexthal had warned them about. Zephyrians, who saw human influence as a disease that needed to be eliminated before it could spread. "Where's Vexthal?" Jake asked. "His ships are holding position about 10,000 kilometers away," Lisa reported. "They're not attacking, but they're not helping either." Jake understood. Vexthal was caught between his growing respect for humanity and his loyalty to Zephyrian hierarchy. The fleet commander could not openly oppose a high caste without risking civil war, but he also could not bring himself to participate in humanity's destruction. The Horizon shuddered under another barrage of energy weapons. Nick's voice came over the intercom with bad news. "Jake, our shields are down to 30%. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 5. We can't take much more of this." Jake looked at his crew and saw the same determination he felt burning inside. Himself, they were outnumbered 30-1 by ships far more advanced than theirs. But they were not going to surrender without a fight. Lisa set course directly toward the lead Zephyrian ship, full power. "Jake, that's suicide." Amy protested. "Maybe, but if we're going to die, we're going to die like humans." The Horizon accelerated toward the Zephyrian battle fleet, its damaged engines straining to provide maximum speed. Jake opened communications to all ships in the area, including Vexthal's fleet. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earth Vessel Horizon. To High Caste Zerthex and the Zephyrian attack fleet, you want to destroy us because you fear what we represent. You're afraid that if your people see there's another way to live, they might choose freedom over perfection." Energy beams lanced out from the Zephyrian ships, striking the Horizon's hull and tearing away armor plating. The ship bucked and rolled, but Jake kept talking. "You call us chaotic and dangerous because we refuse to kneel to your idea of order. But the only thing dangerous about humans is that we never stop trying to be better than we were yesterday." Another barrage of weapons fire struck the Horizon. The lights went out on the bridge, leaving only emergency power and the glow from burning control panels. Nick reported that they had lost life support on half the ship. Jake stood up from his command chair, blood running from a cut on his forehead. On the screen, he could see the massive Zephyrian flagship growing larger as they approached on their final run. "You want to know what makes humans different from every other species you've conquered? We don't fight for territory or resources, or even survival. We fight for the right to choose who we want to become." The Horizon was close enough now that Jake could see individual weapon ports on the alien flagship. In seconds, they would either ram the enemy ship or be destroyed by its defensive systems. Jake had one last message to send. "I am Commander Jake Morrison, and I represent a species that will never kneel to anyone. If you want to destroy us, you'll have to do it while we're standing up." Jake closed the communication channel and braced for impact, but the impact never came. Instead, the Zephyrian flagship moved aside at the last moment, allowing the crippled Horizon to pass harmlessly through the battle formation. Jake looked at his tactical display in confusion and saw something that made him question his own eyes. Vexthal's fleet was moving to intercept High Caste Zerthex's ships. But more shocking than that, several ships from the attack fleet itself had broken formation and were moving to join Vexthal. War Prime Kethfer's voice came over the communication system. "High Caste Zerthex, I challenge your authority to order the destruction of these beings. They have proven their worth through honorable trial, and their courage in the face of certain death exceeds that of any warrior in our fleet." Science Prime Nextel's ship also moved away from the attack formation. "The humans have shown us possibilities we had forgotten existed. To destroy them would be to destroy our own chance for growth and renewal." Jake watched in amazement as more and more Zephyrian ships abandoned the attack fleet. Some joined Vexthal's forces, while others simply withdrew from the battle area entirely. The perfect unity of Zephyrian society was cracking, and Jake realized that his defiant stand had become the catalyst for a revolution. Highcast Zerthex found himself commanding fewer than 10 ships, facing a coalition that outnumbered him 3-1. His voice came over the communication channel, filled with rage and disbelief. You betray your own species for these primitive beings. You abandon millennia of progress for chaos and disorder. No. Vexthal replied, his crystal patterns visible on the screen as he opened a video channel. We abandon stagnation for the possibility of growth. We choose to learn rather than to destroy. What happened next would be remembered in both human and Zephyrian history for centuries to come. Highcast Zerthex, faced with the collapse of everything he had believed in, slowly powered down his weapons and opened his own video channel. On the screen, Jake could see the ancient Zephyrian leader, his crystal body dim with patterns that, Amy whispered, meant defeat and acceptance. Zerthex looked directly at Jake and spoke words that no human had ever heard from an alien ruler. Commander Morrison, your species has accomplished what we believed impossible. You have shown us that our pursuit of perfection led us away from the very qualities that made us worth perfecting. We acknowledge that we have much to learn from you. And then, in a gesture that sent shockwaves through the assembled fleet, Highcast Zerthex lowered his crystalline head in what could only be interpreted as a bow of respect. One by one, the other Zephyrian commanders followed suit. War Prime Kepher, Science Prime Nextal, and finally Fleet Commander Vexthal himself, all bowed their heads to the small human ship that had dared to stand against an empire. Jake stood on the bridge of his damaged vessel, surrounded by his crew, and watched as the most advanced military force in the galaxy acknowledged that sometimes the great estate's strength comes not from the power to force others to kneel, but from the courage to stand up for what you believe in. The war was over before it had truly begun, ended not by superior weapons or tactics, but by the simple human refusal to surrender their right to be free. In the months that followed, the Zephyrian Empire would begin the long process of rediscovering the creativity and adaptability they had sacrificed for perfection. They would learn to value questions as much as answers, and to see strength in diversity rather than uniformity. And Jake Morrison, the human who made the aliens kneel, would be remembered not as a conqueror, but as a teacher who helped an ancient civilization remember what it meant to truly live rather than merely exist.